Hi, my name is Mino Likwasi, and this is Crisis Communications. I am the programs manager and co-founder of Women's Alliance for Equality Limited, that is an LBQ-led and focused NGO working out of Lusaka. In our context, I think crisis can be two things. So it can be a specific event that happens. It can be a time period, and I'll give an example of both of those in a second. But usually, when this thing happens, it creates some instability. It creates a danger either for me as an individual, or for my organization or other organizations, or even for the broader community. Usually, there's a lot of anti-LGBTI narrative around election time. I think this is not only true for Zambia, but many African contexts as well. And that's usually a time for crisis because with this narrative being repeated over and over again, we get a lot more reports of hate crimes happening, people's mental health suffering, suicide rates going up. So that counts as a crisis. Crisis communication has to consider, first of all, what is the crisis? What nature is the crisis? Who does it affect? Who is championing what's causing this crisis? But it also needs to look at other aspects on what are the possible impact. Different crises will present with different levels of impact or possible impact. Some are more severe than others. So it's also looking at who is it that we can work with to deal with this crisis. How should we respond, if we should respond at all, actually? So usually because this comes out very unexpectedly, it's not, I mean, if you know it's going to happen, it's easier to plan for it. But because it's usually so unexpected, out of the blue, that therein lies the problem, because then you don't have so much time to analyze, to monitor, and to react effectively. And that's why it's called a crisis, because it's an emergency. So I think crisis communication needs to take into account all these things, take into account the context also where this crisis is happening, and that helps us shape the response better. I think crisis communication matters because, first of all, it comes down to, I think, two key things. So, security, but also reputation. Um, we don't want a situation where negative information is constantly going out and putting people at risk, or making the broader society feel it's okay to do harm against others because someone is championing a narrative based on their opinion, and oftentimes very little facts. But secondly, it's also important because we don't want to do more harm than good. So, how we respond to situations will shape the general outcome of that. We don't want to respond to anti-LGBT narrative and end up causing a situation where there's increased violence against LGBTI people. So we want to neutralize or completely cut off that problem. So it's also important how we respond so that we don't make the situation worse. Part of what forms a crisis is usually we react more to crisis than preempting. So understanding that the work we do in the contexts where we work, there's obviously certain things that are bound to happen, and it's always better to be prepared for them. So, not to say they will happen, but we know that working around LGBTI organizing broadly might put us at risk of negative media reporting. It might put us at risk of police arrests, illegal detention, bribery, extortion, even violence, whether it's verbal or physical assault. So we know some of the things that can happen by virtue of the work that we do and being in the context that we are. So part of that work is to prepare for if something happens. Hopefully it doesn't, which would be the ideal world, but we're not living in an ideal world. And these things tend to happen more often than not, actually, in our context. So it's how do we prepare for crisis? How do we manage crisis? And the conversation that's happening right now is, do we need a crisis response mechanism? Do we need a crisis response mechanism at country level? Do we need crisis response mechanisms at organizational level? And as a region in Southern Africa or as a continent, do we need something that guides us? Because we know the issues that are most likely to come up. So if we unpack, for example, arrests where people just get arrested on the assumption of being gay or being lesbian, we know that might happen. Who are the perpetrators of this? Oftentimes, it's the police. How does this usually play out? So you're arrested, you're taken to a police cell, your cell phone gets taken away, so you can't communicate. And then who is it that can help us in such situations? If I hear somebody has been arrested and taken to a police cell, they're not in communication with anybody, who do I call? Is it a human rights lawyer? Do I call an embassy? Do I call a funder? So it's good to plan for all that. And that can only be done if we have some form of a crisis response mechanism so that we don't react on impulse. We can plan and be better prepared to respond to these situations. When we talk about twos, also has to be very context specific. So what might work here might not work in the next place. So currently in Zambia, a lot of the narrative is going on social media. So is that the tool that we then use to respond to this crisis that we're going through? Other times, depending on the audience of that you're trying to reach with your crisis communication, is it more effective to use newspapers? Is it more effective if you're, for example, working or trying to reach rural communities to use radio, where there may not be social media or it may not be as active? So it has to be an analysis of the context and see how best you will communicate what you need to communicate to that audience. So social media, we can think of print, we can think of radio, we can think of TV. If we need to use IEC material, it will all depend on the context that we are working within. So if a journalist contacts you and shares some information, would like a response, first of all, the context that you're working in, is it even safe to talk to a journalist? If it is, what is the information that they currently have? Is it factual? Do you have alternative information or resources that can help them have a more objective story or angle for what they're trying to communicate? But it's also about monitoring the situation first. Sometimes journalists would need a story because that's the work. The story needs to go out. But sometimes, do you even need to respond? So no response is also a response. But get your facts right. Don't lie. Don't beat about the bush if you're going to respond and take a position. So be honest, be open, because the more lies you tell or the more you circle around it, it's just going to create an even bigger crisis. One of the government-run newspapers ran an article that stated that an institution called the Other Foundation was providing gay and lesbian funding for COVID-related interventions in Zambia. So organization names were mentioned specifically in the article. And initially, when that came out and we became aware, it was very alarming because then, again, you do not know what the outcome will be. But as organizations and as groups, we sat down and had a discussion. Do we address this? Do we ask the Other Foundation to make a statement about it? Do we make a statement about it? Do we ask our local partners to make a statement about it? And the decision we came to was not to respond, because oftentimes when these kinds of stories have been run in the Zambian media, it will be topic of conversation for a day or two and normally just die off naturally. And that has happened for quite some time. So we said, let's watch it for a few days. Let's see how it goes along. Let's see what people are actually saying about it, because also the narrative has begun to shift. So we wanted to see, are the comments negative? Are they positive? Are they neutral? If they're more positive to neutral, do we even need to respond? So in that particular incident, we decided to not respond, and the story went away on its own. Another example would be an incident where photos of a Pride event were leaked on social media. We don't know where the persons that leaked them got the photos in the first place. So photos of people were online, and the narrative was around gays and lesbian party was held in Lusaka, and the usual narrative of how are these people even having parties in a Christian nation where this shouldn't be happening and they shouldn't be, or they don't exist. So that incident happened, and the story was carried by, I think, 2 or 3 smaller social media bloggers, blog posts with not a very big following. But we knew that that had the potential to be picked up by pages that have hundreds of thousands of followers, and then that would become a bigger issue. So immediately those stories were run. All of us coordinated and started reporting the posts, first of all, to Facebook as hate speech, to try and get them taken down as soon as possible, but also reporting the comments that were very homophobic and giving more information about people and the event in those posts, and also trying to get those taken down. And then the second thing that we were doing while all that was happening and everybody was reporting at the same time was to use another Facebook blogger who also has a huge following to bring up that post on her platform and ask people to go and report that post also, because the more people that are reporting this, the higher the chances that it will get taken down. And then we also directly inboxed these bloggers, and first of all brought about the aspect of the lack of consent and how they shared people's images without their consent. So whether it was a gay person or a heterosexual person, you are not allowed to share photographs of somebody if they have not consented in a public forum. So we used that, but also spoke about the illegality of them spreading that falsehood, which might incite violence against people based on perception and information that might not be factual. So those are the ways we kind of went about it. And luckily, they took the posts down themselves very quickly. I don't want to say it was the threatening, but I think using the aspects of media ethics in the local environment helped, because they were aware they're not allowed to share people's photos without consent. So they did it based off of, I think, the assumption or the hope that people are ignorant enough about these things that they won't know that it's not okay to post people's pictures without the consent. So that's one way we went about that. And those posts were taken down. People still talked about it for a day or two, and then it died off. Just key pointers to think about. Understanding of the context is important. Understanding and mapping of allies is very important. So if the crisis is blackmail, if the crisis is police harassment, if the crisis is religious or church-sponsored homophobia, who are your allies? Who will be most effective to help you deal with that issue? Because if it's an ally that really has no influence or no connection to, for example, the church, that allyship might not be as effective in that crisis. So map your allies, know what exactly they would be useful for, but then also the messaging is key. What type of message are you trying to send out? And I think in some of our contexts, what's important to note is also that no response sometimes is the best response. So when these falsehoods are being spread on social media, as a person, I will get personally offended and I want to address it, but sometimes it's better to just not address it and not fuel the fire. Other times we need to challenge, and I mean that's how I guess change will come. So just those are the key points that I think I would recommend. Understand your context, know your message, map your allies, and also deal with each crisis on a case-by-case basis. There's no one-size-fits-all to dealing with a crisis. Thank you for watching. If you need more information on crisis communication and crisis management, visit taboomedia.com.